Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guest today is Savan, who just last week left his role as Customer Experience Officer in DoD's Office of the CIO. Savan, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Of course, there is so much to talk about. First of all, the Customer Experience Office is so new. When you started your role, the office didn't even exist yet. So could you take us back to the very beginning and could you talk about what the catalyst was for creating this office?
I think if we were to rewind time to about a year and a half ago when we first started this, there's a couple of different things that were catalysts for standing up the CXO. I think there's sort of this general sentiment that customer experience needs to be improved in the department. And you could see that throughout LinkedIn posts, social media. And the second piece of that was, we did have a couple reports that were dropped. The Defense Business Board report dropped, outlining things that we could do to improve customer experience in the office. And then I think the third one is really senior leadership standing up and raising their hand and saying, hey, like, these are things we need to do. People are talking about it. We're seeing it impact readiness and lethality. And at the time, it was John Sherman, who was the CIO, really was a big supporter of customer experience. And that's who brought me on and said, Savan, I'd like to stand this thing up. Can you take ownership of it? And I said, what does that entail, sir? And he goes, we don't know yet, but we'll figure it out as we go. And so that started the whole journey.
We all remember the Fix Our Computers campaign that
Yep.
was followed by the Defense Business Board's investigation that found that user experience across the DoD was below average. So that's
Yep.
kind of, yeah, that's how it all started. But yeah, looking back, could you talk about what the experience of standing up this office was like? What were the biggest challenges that you encountered during this process, especially when we're talking about, building momentum and credibility for this office in this environment that is
Right.
so process driven?
Right. Right. I think if we had to simplify it, there were a lot of challenges, right? Especially in a bureaucracy such as the department. But really, there were a couple core things. The first is being able to have enough senior leadership support so that you can actually have that air cover you need to make the improvements that you want. So that's the first piece. And sometimes you can affect those things and sometimes you can't. In this case, we had great support all the way up to Kathleen Hicks, who was the deputy. The second piece is being able to start to articulate clearly the things that we needed to do to really pinpoint what customer experience meant. I think if you were to ask 100 people, you're probably going to get 100 different answers as to what that means. And so, for us, it was really important to focus sort of what that language meant and then be able to take that and articulate it throughout the department. And, I think the thing about the department that is somewhat unique is that we are the largest employer in America. We're massive. We're a global organization, and you're going to have competing priorities all the time, right? And so anytime we go into a situation, we have to be able to present clearly, why customer experience is important, why focusing on the outcomes of our users is important to the mission, and then what can we do to affect those change. And I think without sort of that clear articulation, you're never going to be able to mobilize that support. And I think the third one really is being able to present a vision, but also craft a plan that you can start to execute against, and then mobilizing that commitment so that you can actually have other people become supporters of what it is that you're trying to do. The general sentiment within the department is that customer experience needs to be improved. I think if you asked anybody, they would tell you there are a million different things that we could do. The challenge of that is because there's just so broad of a landscape that it makes it somewhat hard at times to really get people to focus on key things that we can actually start to mobilize against and deploy them in a way where it's efficient and people can understand why we're making those investments.
going back to all those points that you just made, you mentioned that you needed a vision where you were going, you needed a plan. Could you talk about all those components and how you presented this like vision and plan and what the strategy that you relied on throughout this process?
Yeah, that's a great question. We're, excuse me, we're in a unique position in that we sit um, essentially at the highest level within the department, right? We're the highest sort of ranking customer experience office in the department. And so what makes us unique is that we don't actually go out and do user testing per se. We don't go and buy anything and deploy it. And so our superpower is in our ability to see sort of the landscape, be able to get a broad understanding of what the needs are, but then be able to put together the policies and the oversight needed for us to really sort of impact change at a global enterprise level. And so, one of the things that we did very early on is we started to draft up, what is sort of our key pillars? What are our key pillars within CXO? And what are the things that's going to make us unique within this organization? And really, we came up with a handful. Some of those are user experience, which is sort of, whenever I talk about this, I talk about it like a road trip because they all sort of add up together. User experience for me is sort of that tail end piece. It's the outcome of our journey to get there. The other parts of that road trip that's more sort of in the beginning are the strategic direction or strategic guidance. You'll see that in Fulcrum, which is the latest IT advancement strategy. So that sort of sets the tone. It gives you the directions to get there. We also have, an IT governance piece. How do you actually sort of govern IT in an effective way where you can actually see and get a pulse of the things that are working versus not working, and performance management, which is essentially trying to look at things in a very data-centric way where we can align the metrics and the outcomes to the business needs of the organization. And what that did is it took a lot of the subjectivity out of what user experience is, and it started to make it a lot more tangible for people, especially, as you get from the end user all the way up to these 3-star, 4-star forums where they're so far removed, right, from the day-to-day of the operation, that we need to take information and data and then create that narrative so they can understand why these things are happening. And that was the performance management piece, the performance metrics piece. It gave us sort of that data backing. And so, you take the strategic piece, you take the performance management, you take the IT governance, and you take user experience, and all those things is sort of this road trip that we're all sort of taking together.
Let's kind of talk about the data piece of it. As you know, as you were adopting that and kind of this data-centric approach kind of was giving you the ability to put your finger on a pulse and like figure out what's going on. Could you talk about what you were finding there?
I think with the data piece specifically, so there's I think two things, right? And Anastasia, I think what you're asking for is more oriented towards data around the analytics of maybe specific tests, like how fast does a computer boot up, or how performant is the network. There's that sort of piece of it that for us, we didn't really have our hands on as much as some of the military departments that actually know the mission, they know their talent. So there's that sort of piece. The other piece of the data is, and this is more tangible to a lot of the work that we're doing, is around, are we actually hitting our business metrics, right? And it would be the analogy, I think, for me is looking at, say, like a P&L in industry, right? You're sort of looking at the spreadsheet of how your business is doing, and then making sure that the investments you're making are actually aligning towards the bets that you're making from a business perspective. And so that's really the data piece there. What we're doing within CXO is we're sort of that bridge between I'll just give out a hypothetical situation. If say the Army is making an investment in um, uh, buying new laptops, right? They're provisioning them and they're state of the art. How is that investment then improving on our ability to be a lot more performant or being ready or saving time, right? And I think that crosswalk between the hands-on, data that the users are feeling and that we're tracking there is aligning back to the business specifically.
Throughout this process, I'm just curious about user feedback. What were you hearing from users? What were you getting? Maybe something that you were getting made you adjust where you were heading. Could you highlight a couple of things?
So for us, um, where we sit right now as sort of the highest customer experience function within the department, um, the organization is massive, and so we think about ways where we can not specifically go out and talk to individual users per se. Like I won't go out and talk to 100 different soldiers and 100 different people that are, let's just say, in Space Force or whatever. But what we think about is how do we actually take the tooling and the methodologies of best human-centered design practices and then give that tooling and those processes back into the department, to the military departments and the defense agencies so that they can go out and talk to their users effectively, right? And a lot of our conversations really stemmed around, how do we scale tools, say survey tools or sentiment tools, in a way where the average organization within the department can use these things in a meaningful way to start to get that feedback. And so I think a roundabout way of me answering that question is, for the first year at least, we were trying to get a baseline of who can do the things they need to do, like getting user feedback, who can't do them. And then the people that are doing them, are they doing them in an efficient way where you can start to collect the data and then see a lot of the signal throughout the noise, right? And do they have the right talent and the right processes in place to get that continuous picture so that they can get more clarity over time. And so for us, that was the biggest initiative in year one, is getting the baseline, understanding what that looks like, and then from there we can start to actually be a lot more precise. And with the new administration, I'm looking forward to however they're going to go about doing that, and especially with some of the changes with AI and tooling. I think there's a lot more efficient ways that you can start to get information and feedback from users, and I'm really excited about what they're going to be doing here.
Yeah, could you talk a little bit more about maybe your expectations from the new administration, what you're particularly looking for or maybe looking forward to?
Yeah, I'm generally an optimistic person. I think there isn't a right or a wrong. What's funny is I'll digress a little bit, but I was talking to my therapist and we were just talking about right and wrong decisions, and she said, "Savan, there is no right and wrong decision. There's just the next decision, right? There's just a thing that you're actually going out and doing next." And so to put myself in that frame of mind of what's next for the department, it's really about embracing a change in landscape. And right now, we're seeing a change in landscape, excuse me, of the workforce. We're seeing a change of landscape of technology, and we're seeing a change in landscape of the processes, right? And what I'm looking forward to most is how the department is going to shift and realign, a lot of the changes into the needs of the customer. Regardless of the administration and regardless of technology, the thing that will remain consistent is the need to really support the warfighter, to be outcome oriented and to support our customers, whether they're our partners or people in industry and academia. And I think that will be a consistent regardless of the administration, regardless of what the makeup of the workforce looks like.
Just to touch on the workforce, because this is the reality that we're dealing with, given the rifts, given the hiring freeze, given the firing of the probationary workers. What are the potential implications of that on this particular piece of the puzzle?
Yeah. I mean, again, like I think I'm a pretty optimistic person. I think the composition of what the workforce looks like will undoubtedly change. I think the composition of what customer experience looks like from a workforce perspective will change. However, I do think that the nature at which the new administration will tackle things like customer experience, they have a new opportunity in front of them, right? They have the ability to make bets in different places that I may never have thought of when I was there, whether that's through improved acquisitions of tools to scale certain things, whether that's through streamlining processes. Maybe you're sort of shifting organizations around to be more efficient. Or maybe that's just to even look at certain skill sets within the workforce that we may not have been hired for in the past. And so they're given a new opportunity with these challenges. And I think for the most part, those opportunities are what they're sort of laying the groundwork for, right? With these changes to the workforce. So I'm generally optimistic about how it's all going to play out. I think there are very exciting things coming up from just a technology standpoint that could make some of the work that we're doing a lot more efficient. And I hope they take advantage of all those things.
And I wanted to go back to something that you mentioned, about the process of getting that baseline down. Could you talk maybe about some of the lessons learned during that process?
So one of the things that we had to do in the first year is we were given a set of metrics. We inherited them just by nature of us jumping into this thing sort of midstream. And I won't I won't talk about them specifically in detail here, but I will say that some of the lessons learned were around, and these will be lessons that regardless of if you're in the department or if you're in industry are applicable. We took something as simple as PC boot up time, right? How fast is your computer turning on from when you put your butt in your seat to when you start up the machine and you can start to actually work. And a simple question as that, you would think you would get very straightforward responses, right? But what we found was, the thing about asking an organization such as the department a question like that without some sort of clarity and structure, you're going to get responses that are all over the place. And so what people had done was they measured things in different ways. So some people measured them from when they put their CAC in their computer and when their machine started. Other people measured it from when they could open up Outlook and start answering emails. And so the minutia of just the language and expectations was something that we had to get down very quickly, because we're asking these people to invest time and effort and money into getting us these baseline metrics. And if we don't have sort of the common consensus of what that looks like, then our results will be all over the place. And that's sort of where I will touch on a little bit some of the things we had done with the consortium. That's where something like the consortium actually became very powerful. It's a way for us to bring together the actual people that are responsible for gathering those baselines, and then be able to have, in a very efficient way, a method of communicating to them our expectations. They can ask questions, not just to us, but to each other about, hey, how are you guys doing this? What tools are you using? what are some of the expectations for boot up times in your neck of the woods versus ours. And so, before something like the CXO was stood up, that was impossible to do. You couldn't just walk into another office and ask them questions, right? Just because of the nature of how big the department is. And so just even the minutia of something like that, and being able to bring people together was exceptionally important in the beginning. And I think, like, if you were to ask, what are some of the most important things we had done? If I were to simplify it, it'd be just sort of just pulling people together was very, very hard because of the nature of our mission and the nature of the priorities. And so to be able to do that was exceptionally important.
Yeah, this is such a huge undertaking. Just a quick follow-up on the metrics. You mentioned that you inherited the metrics. Have they evolved during your time in the office?
Yeah. Yeah. So our expectations when we initially set up the consortium was we had metrics that we inherited that we were actually tasking them to start to collect data on. However, metrics are just a means to get answers, right? They are not the de facto thing. They should be telling us a story, which is, going back to the nature of building narratives. And so, for us, being able to evolve metrics to accurately reflect the mission set that was at hand was exceptionally important, but also be able to really have the conversation around trade-offs of, are these metrics even helpful, right? Are they actually doing the things that we need them to do? And so the nature of getting metrics in and of itself is not important. It's really, is the data that we're collecting helping us improve on readiness and lethality and all those things that we're looking for. And so, technology moves at a quick pace. Our mission moves at a quick pace. The talent moves at a quick pace. And so, we need to be able to adjust what we're looking at to accurately reflect that.
I was curious, could you highlight maybe during your time a couple of really successful examples that you've heard from service members, from civilians, where their experience significantly improved, and you're like, that's what I was trying to achieve. That's what I'm here for.
I would say, the biggest one is around really getting newer PCs refreshed. I think that's a huge deal. If you look across the board, the amount of unclassified laptops that are out there are significantly newer than what they were, previous to when we were there. I won't say that's a direct contribution on our part. The cycle of technology and the cycle of reporting is exceptionally long in the department. And so I will actually credit that to a lot of my predecessors that actually sort of raised their hands and said, hey, like, we know this is going to be an important thing. Let's put these things into place. But I do think that it was a lot of the work that we had done to be able to collect that information and then be able to present that in a way that said, investments in technologies like this are exceptionally important. We should continue to do that. And there's really the other side of that is we talk a lot about investments in user experience for the warfighter, just in terms of money usually. But there are things that we have done in the past that don't require money that improve user experience. For example, a lot of the configurations that are within community laptops or community PCs are, let's just say, configured in a not optimized way. Is that probably the most positive way of spinning that? And I'll give you an example here. If you're going into a meeting, a lot of times you'll have like a PC that's there, and people will put their CAT card in, log in, and it'll spit out your PowerPoint slides and your you're off and running, right? But you times that by hundreds, if not potentially thousands of people that are actually plugging their CAC in there and turning on that machine. And over time, the configuration of that machine just gets more bloated and bloated and bloated. And so being able to start to implement best practices to efficiently configure and then potentially sort of like reconfigure those machines so that they're not getting exceptionally bloated and taking a significantly long time to boot is something that we were tracking. And the other side of that is, being able to show that we can actually improve improvements for user experience in ways that are not directly tied to money. Because I think a lot of times the misconception is you need to go buy something new, or really that's just one facet of it.
If we were talking about investments being made or just changes that are being implemented that don't even require any money. Um, I'm just I was wondering how do you think about like the changes that the office brought within the department, in terms of how it influenced the culture around IT inside the Defense Department. Maybe are you seeing this growing understanding that user experience really matters?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the general sentiment is that user experience does matter. It's just a matter of trying to understand what that entails, right? And in a way where we can be affecting some sort of change. I think the question, Anastasia, you have around culture is a good one. And for us, if I had to distill what customer experience was, it's really a focus of the outcomes versus the methodologies or versus the supplementary types of things, right? And I think it's being able to put a outcome-based lens over whatever decisions you're making. And I think the new administration talks a lot about this, where it's sort of this resurgence to focusing back on the warfighter, and whatever is not supporting, the warfighter, we're not going to do. And I think that's the right move, is to really try to understand, what it is that we're doing and how is it actually going to impact the people downrange. And the culture of any organization, that where you don't have that continued reinforcement of being outcome oriented, you can get lost in the shuffle a lot of times, especially as you get bigger and bigger, and you start to think about, is what I'm doing today on a daily basis really affecting the bottom line if you're, in industry, or, our ability to be ready within the department. Sometimes you forget sort of like why you're doing the things you're doing, and really sort of that's the essence of what the CXO was helping to reinforce every day.
Something that I wanted to make sure that we talked about is the fulcrum strategy.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about it a year ago
Yep.
at TechNet Cyber. Yeah,
Yep.
could you? I think this was one of the biggest developments. Could you talk about the strategy and also reflecting back on it, maybe the impacts that it has made over the past year?
Yeah, Fulcrum was it was interesting in that the timing of Fulcrum lined up perfectly with the establishment of CXO. And I don't know if that was an intentional thing that our leadership was doing, but for the listeners that don't know, Fulcrum is the IT advancement strategy for the Department of Defense, and it is essentially our North Star for IT. And when we sat down to craft what is the next version of the digital modernization strategy look like, what does that evolution look like? What we did was we took the actual users, subject matter experts, into a room, and we made sure that the DNA of that document really reflected what those people were experiencing downrange, right, within their workspace. And what that did was, it just by nature of having those subject matter experts in the room, it by nature sort of put this focus on user experience. It put the focus on, outcomes. And really, Fulcrum is not designed to tell people how to do things. That's up to the military departments. That's up to the defense agencies. We are not experts by any means in their mission set. We don't have the talent. We don't have the resources. But it does give them the outcome, the what, and what we wanted to do was give agencies and military departments a tool that when they were sitting down and writing their own IT advancement strategy, to be able to reference back to, that really reflected the urgency of user experience and focusing on that. And I think going back to maybe our initial question of why CXO was stood up, and sort of the whole genesis of it. A lot of times people had challenges talking about why things were important as investments, right? And especially with all the competing priorities. And Fulcrum was their support document for that. It gave them a why, and it helped them communicate that in a way that was authoritative. It was signed, and it was something that was backed by the highest levels of the DoD. And that made the conversation a lot easier if you're downrange and you said, hey, I'd like to buy a tool to help me gather metrics for how my network is doing. How healthy is it? How performant is it? And so, we really wanted it to be a buddy, like a friend, a support group, versus just a document that was exceptionally long, that had all the details in it, and make it useful. And I think we did that.
Can you highlight something over the past year that has made a difference?
Whew. There's quite a few. I think the two that I'll highlight here, and I've highlighted it in a different segment. So I think the first one is Fulcrum, and we've heard from individuals that are sitting down and actually writing their IT advancement strategies, whether it's the Army or the Air Force, how helpful Fulcrum has been in helping them really sort of craft their own IT advancement strategy. And so I think that's the first one. The second one that I'm exceptionally proud of is starting to build that culture of collaboration. Like I said, before CXO was stood up, we never had a consortium. We never had the simple ability for somebody in the Army to easily talk to somebody in the Marines or the Navy or the Air Force in a collaborative way. Like, you would think that'd be a simple thing. You just pick up a phone or, send them an email, but it was exceptionally hard. And I do think that the art and the practice of customer experience is one that takes the entire community. You can't just have one customer experience officer and then expect to have good outcomes and good customer experiences. That is impossible to do. And so you have to have a community that really understands the importance of the nature of it. And then, once you have that, you have to give them the ability to have a voice and to communicate and to participate. And I think we did that. And I'm hoping that, over the next few years, as customer experience evolves within the department, they will go back to, what we did initially about standing up the consortium, and really, scale a lot of those things. And, what we did was just a start, right? We had a handful of meetings a year, but, the one thing that I could see that would be exceptionally fun and exciting for the department is being able to showcase, great things that they're doing through practical development or implementation of tools, be able to have use cases of things that have worked well, maybe use cases of things that didn't work well, that, they spent a ton of time and money on, that were good lessons that they can teach other people. And I'm hoping that that's just general sense of community and collaboration continues, even though I'm not there.
That was my next question. What are you hoping for in terms of what's next for the office? But also, what do you think we can expect from it in 2025 and beyond?
Whew. That's a good question. Again, like I'm pretty optimistic. I think like for the new administration and for the office coming up, I think there will always be a need to focus on the customer, right? Without a focus on the customer, you're dead in the water. Like, why are you even there doing the things you're doing? Whether that's, you're an industry or the DoD or Department of State, wherever. If you don't sort of have that clear focus on the people that you're supporting and the reason you're there, then why even do the things you're doing? And so that sort of like importance will still be there. How they will go about doing that, I'm sure will change. And I'm sure, whether that's through standing up, CXOs across all the military departments, or whether that's through maybe one aggregated CXO team that has, the ability to prototype and develop things and deploy things through a centralized system, or whether that's maybe, leveraging our relationships with industry and academia more so that we don't have as much of that requirement in-house, and we're going out and seeing what's happening out in industry from a customer experience perspective and bringing that back into the fold. So I think the permutation of what that looks like will definitely change, but the importance of it and the reason we're there will definitely not change.
And this is reading the tea leaves, but I'm curious about your perspective. What can we maybe expect from the military services in terms of standing up those offices and amplifying the user experience?
Yeah, I'm not sure what we can expect. I think there's been enough shifts in the department, with people leaving, like myself, that that the structure of how they're going to support CXO, or customer experience in the future will definitely change. I know in the Defense Business Board report, one of their recommendations was to hire a CXO for each one of the military departments, and then sort of like be able to, scale customer experience that way. I honestly think that was a great suggestion. I think that's a suggestion that, moving forward, that the department should continue to invest in. Now, whether they take that suggestion and then actually hire senior level customer experience executives to be able to run parts of those organizations is, I don't know if that's going to be a thing or not, but I do think, the importance of it, and what the DBB report was highlighting is having senior enough representation in the room, whether that's through a CXO or something comparable to that, to be able to continuously monitor and then communicate, a lot of the work that CXOs would do, and then be able to make adjustments, as things come up. And so, I don't know what that's going to look like, but just from my perspective, the investments in CX is definitely still needed.
Just to quickly follow up on that, what would your advice be to the military services uh, around improving user experience?
Ooh, that's a great question. Nobody's ever asked me that one. Um, I think my advice would be, uh, always take the time to listen. Always be asking the why. What is it that we're doing? Why is it that we're doing the things we're doing? Be on the lookout for ways where you could start to capture a lot of that information in a way that you can mobilize things against. What we've been really good at is, giving feedback, right? The department is, a massive organization that has a lot of people with different priorities. And you will have data if you go looking for it. You will have information if you go looking for it. The scarcity of that is not the problem that we have. The challenge that we have is, making sure that we actually can capture that information in a structured way, in a repeatable way, where we can actually then start to mobilize some commitment and then making enduring changes. And I think that's the big challenge. And so if I had to give advice to the military departments is, continue to invest in those things. And because it will save you a ton of time and heartache in the future. Because the people at the front lines, they know what's going on, right? It's not the people at the Pentagon. It's not the people sort of outside of the Pentagon, whether it's in the public or in Congress. It's the people downrange. And so, continue to listen to them and make sure that their feedback is getting captured in a way you can mobilize a lot of those changes.
Yeah, and before I let you go, a couple more questions before we're
Sure.
running out of time. Um, Anything that you didn't get to or you didn't get done during your time at the office? Anything that you didn't get to?
Yeah, one of the things that I was excited about was working on this, what I would call a toolkit. And, I will give all the credit to some of the people that have been doing something comparable to this. Organizations like ATNF, the VA, USDS, they do a good job of writing playbooks or cookbooks and being able to take best practices, ideas, tools, and then scale them through digital channels. And that was one of the things that I was looking forward to doing that I hope they continue to do is, how do you, I've talked about sort of bringing people together. I've talked about how they can actually start to collaborate as a group or as a community. The follow-up piece to all that is, how do you take the outcome of those collaborations and then distill it in a way you can actually start to scale a lot of the changes based on their feedback, right? And one of the ways you can do that is through digital toolkits or forums where you can create best practices or patterns or libraries that people can look at and then take that and apply it back to their own respective organizations. But that was one thing that I was very excited to do. Life has different things for me, and so I'm sure that whoever takes on the mantle next, I'm sure that will be in their perspective at some point.
And of course, the last one, what's next for you? Yeah, how are you feeling about your last day and what's next for you?
Yeah, how I'm feeling is I've sort of been on this roller coaster, to be completely honest. And the CXO job was honestly my favorite job ever, and I attribute that to my leadership, Leslie Beavers, and my team. Robert Franzen was my deputy, and it was an amazing ride. And so I've gone from this position of having the best job in the world to then sort of moving on in a very short period of time. And I'm sort of at the tail end of that now, where I feel very excited about what's coming up next. And I don't know what that is. I really want to find a place that I can plant my flag in for a few years and continuously learn either from the people or the industry and contribute some valuable changes.
All right. So, and we'll be following your journey for sure.
I appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Of course, of course. Well, thank you so much. There is so much to talk about. This is a really interesting time. And again, the office is so young, so new. There is so much to do and so much to track, but yeah, we'll be following all of that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Again, thank you so much. I'd like to thank today's guest, Savan Kong, a former Chief Experience Officer in DoD's Office of the CIO. I'm Anastasia Obis, and you're watching Federal News Network. Now, let me send you back to the studio for more on the DoD Modernization Exchange.